Gilbert, all of our projects are floundering. I've decided on a bold new strategy.
Let me guess. You're going to randomly reorganize the department, just like last month.
You have to admit that's bold.
It's your Business Strategy 450 Week 4 recap. Welcome back. Just a reminder of what we did last week. First, we did a team project kickoff. We did a little bit of an overview, talked a little bit about what I would be expecting out of your team project. We talked about assignment of teams and cases, which will be happening this week, and I've discussed that in my presentation for the week. Reminded you to look at the project team guidelines and that you need to generate a team expectations agreement consistent with the project team guidelines. Please go out to those project team guidelines that are posted, and then pay attention to the lecture which is coming up shortly, and I'll talk a little bit more about our team projects. The major topics we covered last week were about internal organization inputs to strategy. We talked about resources, capabilities, core competencies, and competitive advantages of organizations. And then we spent some time talking about Steve Jobs in our BStrat 450 network discussion forum. As we discussed, we talked about the strategy employed by Apple and the impact of Steve Jobs' departure, or announced departure as a result of his illness, the second departure in 2 years. You all had some very distinct and different points of view. That's good. That's the point of this class. There isn't a right answer, and I appreciate the attention you all gave to the discussion and your thoughts on whether Steve Jobs' departure would or wouldn't hurt Apple. I think overall there was a consensus that Apple will survive, but you also all made some very good arguments about how Steve Jobs' departure could impact the company negatively over the long run, since he was such a critical part of their strategic vision. Then we had our Manhattan discussion thread on Professor Jeffrey Pfeffer's point of view. He's the professor from Stanford Graduate School of Business who discussed the knowing learning gap, and you all responded to the knowing learning gap, and it sounds like some of you even had some pretty personal responses or personal experiences that informed your point of view. Some of the common themes that came out of our discussion is that even though common sense might dictate that we should do certain things, the knowing doing gap gets us to the wrong place often as individuals and organizations because of the fear of speaking up and doing the right thing. We also talked a little bit about the lack of training and the failure to have a learning organization so that people don't have the right knowledge even to begin to bridge the knowing doing gap. We talked about inappropriate incentives and performance measures from a human resources perspective so that people are incented to do the wrong thing even though they know it's the wrong thing. And we talked a little bit about the ineffective communication by strategic leaders in terms of helping people understand how to bridge the knowing doing gap. So we learned a lot about how even though we put strategies together that we think will result in great results, or result in the right opportunities for a company, we also realize that often companies mismatch what they do with what they say they want to do, and it's a lot of it has to do with some of these factors that you all identified during our ongoing discussion. So that was a summary of last week. Let's move on to the week 4 lecture.